Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Salesforce Ben webinar. Welcome. Let us know in the chat where everyone's joining from. We have a super global audience, so it's always really cool to see where everyone's joining. So yeah, thanks for joining once again. So we're really excited for today's session. We are joined by the NC Square team and some brilliant guest speakers as well. And we're going to be talking about the future of automation. So we're going to be talking about whether rule-based automation will continue to be the norm when it comes to Salesforce, and if AI-powered decisions are going to take over. We know that AI is a key topic in the Salesforce ecosystem and in tech in general, and everyone's talking about it, but not everyone is adopting it kind of at the same rate. So we kind of wanted to kind of set the scene for today's conversation and really find out what everyone's level of AI adoption is before we get into it. So I'm just going to open our first poll of the day. We're hoping to have quite an interactive session for everyone. So yeah, please answer in the poll section. What is your level of AI adoption at this moment in time as it pertains to your role within your organization? We're really curious to see, and we'll chat about the poll results with our speakers today as well. Excellent. So yeah, just a couple of bits of housekeeping kind of before we get into the panel. As you know, at Salesforce Ben, we have a variety of channels. We have a really popular newsletter. We have our YouTube channel, which is super active. We have our webinars, our podcast, and social media as well. So do keep an eye out to kind of monitor news, trends, and tips for the Salesforce ecosystem. If you have any questions that you would like to ask our panel today, please let us know, because we can kind of take all the questions at the end. And finally, if you don't manage to take down every single useful insight that you hear during the conversation today, don't worry, because we'll be sure to send the recording to everyone who's attending and who's registered as well. In terms of what we're going to be covering, I will hand over to our host today to kind of meet the panel. We're going to be covering automation today, so kind of where are we at just at this moment in time. We're then going to be going into, what does the future hold in terms of automation for Salesforce, and then we'll take some questions at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our host for today. Over to you, Toms.
Thank you, Claudia. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. I'm Toms, the Customer Success Engineer here at NC Squared. We're the home of Distribution Engine and Booking Engine. I'll be the moderator today. Claudia, I think now is a good time for us to take a look at the results of the first poll, just to see how everyone's doing. Majority of us. So the question was, what's your level of AI adoption in your role or your organization? There's a huge majority who dabble in AI. So it sounds that we're not there yet in being a cutting edge practitioners, but also we're not ignoring it completely or don't use it. So that's really good to see, and gives us really good context for the rest of the conversation. We do have a skeptic, so that's interesting. So today I'm joined by two excellent guests to discuss, will AI replace rules-based Salesforce routing in the short, medium term? We were meant to have another guest, Francis, who unfortunately has got the flu. We're all sending you well wishes, Francis. Hope you get better soon. Also, Claudia, I think now we can launch the next poll. So it'd be good to also hear everybody else's, your audience's take on the big question. So please take part. We'll recap that a little bit later. But let's start with a quick round of intros. Guys, if you wanna come on stage with me, Mike, Jeff, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, thanks, Toms. My name is Mike. I work at ZipRecruiter. I am the manager of the Salesforce implementation there, managing all things technical in the Salesforce ecosystem, supporting RevOps and sales.
Thanks.
And hi, thanks for having me. My name is Jeff Ignacio. I'm the head of revenue operations at Keystone AI. We service the supply chain industry. I've been in revenue operations for about 13 years now. I lead our go-to-market strategy as well as our business systems organization.
Great. Thank you both. So it sounds like we've got a great mix of perspectives here on the call today. I've already introduced myself. I'm Tom's the customer success engineer here at NC Squared. Really, my role today is to be the moderator. So the plan for today is to have sort of a practical, fast conversation around, as Claudia's already said, where we are today, and then having a look in the future. So let's go back to the fundamental question that we want to cover today. Will AI replace rules-based Salesforce routing in the short to medium term? It's a big one. It's a big question. For years, teams have built routing and rules on clear human-defined logic, ownership, territory, SLAs, capacity. It's transparent, predictable, controllable. But AI promises us something new. Something different, adaptability, learning from patterns, improving over time, making smart decisions that static rules perhaps couldn't. So where is the balance? Is any of that true? Is AI ready to replace rules or just enhance them? What does trust look like when you hand over routing decisions to an algorithm? And what are some of the practical steps between today's rule sets and tomorrow's intelligent distribution? I would love to, before we sort of go into our hot takes, would love to hear what our audience thinks. So from this next poll, a lot of us are in the middle, hybrid. I think, I mean, no surprises. I think, and that's where the rest of the conversation is probably headed as well. But yeah, it sounds that we have very sure very fewer votes in the yeses and nos, but most of the audience are in the hybrid that it's not necessarily going to replace it, but we're looking at a hybrid future. So let's look at today. So let's start by taking a look at where we are today. A lot of automation, routing, lead scoring, attribution, billing is still powered by good old rules-based logic. But AI is firmly in the picture. I'm sure every day we log onto the internet, we see new AI thought leadership, new tools, new use cases. So let's talk about how we are doing things today, and also map where AI is already helping us today to move the needle. So perhaps the first question to you, Mike, in your experience, what are you using rules-based routing for? What are some highlights, some quick hits in the pros and cons, perhaps?
Yeah, so in my experience using rules-based routing, we rely very heavily on that currently, specifically through distribution engine. We need to make sure leads and accounts, contacts, cases, whatever object in Salesforce specifically it may be, are distributed accurately and fairly. I think that's when we have a desire to explain things. We need rules that we can then go explain what the automation did. So the biggest advantage of using rule-based is determinism. I know exactly why a record went where it did. Every decision is traceable, auditable, and explainable, as I mentioned before. Compliance loves that, right? Compliance would be the team that loves that we can explain stuff away. But the downside is really rigidity. I think as you build out more rules, there's a big work tree that you have to flow through. It becomes complicated to update the rules specifically over time, and some of them might fall out of the current. So what I'm looking for, move out of the. We'll move on. The hierarchies, exceptions, it becomes brittle, though, I think is really what I'm looking for. So I think those are probably the quick hits on pros and cons there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So big on sort of rules-based is really great when you need to sort of prove what happened and sort of to grow and nurture that trust within an organization that the rule is kind of set to do something. And then you've already touched sort of already a little bit on what perhaps are the limitations, and you've already highlighted, and that's something I really agree with, is that rules-based logic perhaps really powerful when it's let's say configured correctly, but that's the key right there, configured correctly. So when we sort of think about where AI could contribute, perhaps it's helping us there a little bit, right? So first of all, understand what is configured. If you've inherited a setup that somebody else has built, how do you then understand and trust it? Again, going back to trust and transparency, I think AI could probably really contribute there. And then also that perhaps verify that the outcomes that we set out to achieve with whatever the new processes that we're introducing, that we're actually sort of achieving those outcomes. How are we tracking towards them? That is again sort of probably more into data and analytics, where I think AI could definitely help us sort of tie the whole picture together. Great. Jeff, maybe one for you. Where are you seeing a strong fit for AI today?
So I've had the pleasure of implementing quite a few AI-infused projects in go-to-market this year. I think there's a distinction between, workflows powered with AI as a part of it. So AI-powered workflows is what I call it, and then there's the agentic, like autonomous modalities that you can employ in your go-to-market as well. But let's just start with the simplest use case. Form fills is a project that I've worked on considerably this year. The more fields you add on a form, the lower your form fill percentage is. So, the holy grail is, can I just do first name, last name, and email, right? Just get to the bare minimum, or maybe just the email. A typical workflow would look something like this. It would be send the data out to a data enrichment provider. The data enrichment provider would return some results. You would score that data, and then you would figure out if it reaches a threshold and then route the lead. Today, a lot of marketers, they're adding, how did you hear about us? What pain are you solving for? Just getting a little bit more clarity before a sales rep or a sales development rep gets involved. And what can happen if you let that open question on your form, you get all sorts of wacky stuff come through, right? Spam notwithstanding, you get support inquiries, finance inquiries, sales inquiries through that front form. But what you can do today is you can take that text, or before you'd have to have very strict, contains logic to figure out where to route the lead. But now you can just add a very simple LLM step to read the message, provide a thesis on where it should go to, and then route that lead appropriately. And that's come a long way. You no longer have to have either really brittle if this then that logic, or a person in the middle routing the lead. So that's one simple use case that I am seeing where you can employ like LLM logic to do the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. If you sort of in the previous role, if you were to design a form that sort of every department has their questions answered, you'd say you'd end up with quite a few questions there. Probably marketing want their questions, sales want their qualification questions, product probably want to hear something in the form. But yeah, if you were to design a form that answers all those, the uptake would probably be very low. So it sounds like that there's an opportunity to be a bit looser with specific questions. If you leave it more open-ended, then the LLM can help sort of look at it and figure out the context, what the question is, what the inquiry is about, and route it correctly. Cool. I don't know, Mike, what are some AI use cases that you're working with today right now?
Yeah, so the biggest one is really just enrichment, right? I think to Jeff's point is taking the minimal amount of information from a form and being able to pass it through to define something about that, to give us more context into what the intent of the person that was filling out the form was trying to convey, right? And then that gives us going back to the deterministic values of rules-based routing, is we can now, instead of having the multiple contains, the different waterfalls, the different trees, we could then say, based on the intent of these leads or contacts, whatever it may be, we'll go to specific people, and those are things that we can define. But I think Jeff hits a really good point. Is like when you try to when you try to have a form, specifically free text, and you're trying to route that somewhere, you have to have contains, that really builds out a very complex system that is very hard to maintain, right? It really becomes like, and it's legacy. Then you go back and you say, oh, why did we do this, right? Instead of just, again, it comes back to the intent. So for us, one of the areas that we're trying to use it and use it LLMs is through the intent of what the customer was trying to convey and enriching the data.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I see, Jeff, you've posted in chat some other use cases, and sorry if I cut you off too early there. So you also looking at account planning, pre-call prep, post-call recaps, opportunity scoring, using methodologies such as MEDDIC or really any of the other methodology that the organization uses. You can share an example from perhaps the support world that has been proven really useful if you use, for example, email to case. The customers don't always fill in the subject line neatly that, hey, I have an inquiry about this product, where yes, you could build out a contains rule that says, it's product Y, it should go to the product specialist. This often is a use case, picking it out from sentiment, picking out from contacts, what product is it about, especially if you have a large portfolio of products that you support. Same with language. If you have a support agent that speaks Japanese and the case comes in Japanese, they haven't really spelled it out in the case that, hey, I'm emailing you in Japanese. So this is where you could use AI can use AI to kind of figure out that, hey, it's a case in Japanese. It's about product A, without calling specifically out. It's about product A, so it can go to the correct support agent. But of course, that also works in the RevOps side and in the sales side. Any other use cases we want to share? Yeah, go ahead.
To build on that, Tom, I was just thinking, I worked at an AI chatbot, which integrated into Salesforce. And, that technology came out 7-8 years ago. They were building off of NLP. And I think AI for customer service has been a use case probably since the 70s. But the technologies have grown considerably to get to a place now where you go beyond just NLP and you're now using the LLMs, and it just shrink wraps, that surface area of being able to respond to customers with a RAG, like your internal customer knowledge base, and now including human in the loops to intervene when there needs to be an escalation. I think we can start to build and employ many of these systems in our Salesforce instances.
Great. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about hype. Can you think of any use cases that perhaps today are overhyped, and then the opposite, what you think maybe doesn't get enough love and it's a bit underhyped in today's world of automation?
I mean, in my experience so far, right, all this is rapidly growing and becoming more prevalent. But I think overhyped right now is that the idea that AI can replace human judgment entirely. In complex or governed systems, you see that compliance and fairness is still human oversight is still required in those spaces. And so I'm very much in the camp of AI works best as a co-pilot for right now. Even again, to Jeff's point with the RAGs, there are things that it can provide the customer or internal support, whatever that may be, with our internal knowledge base, but there's still some oversight within that.
I think there are two areas of overhype, which we'll have to address at some point. One is the sprawl and the technical debt that we're now incurring by adding in AI, plus the AI models that you use. They're rapidly iterating pretty quickly. So if you built your engine off of GPT-4, and then we're about 5, and then 6 will come out soon, you do want to go back and refresh the model. So it doesn't replace good old-fashioned upgrading and managing your technical debt. The second piece is hallucination is a major problem in areas where you need to have, Six Sigma level, clarity. And so, the use cases for where you deploy the LLMs, it's not in mass. You're not going to generalize every single use case. So those are the two, areas of concern today. For example, with hallucination, I train some of my engines to, have appropriate SQL queries to then filter objects correctly and then do the math and then provide me some insight into our pipeline and as well as changes week over week. And so when you get to that place where, I have the bot reporting out to me and then showing me the data, I've actually experienced a couple times where I've gone through the math and did it myself by hand and saw that it was very different from what the LLM was providing me. So, it's not there yet in terms of, running the general operating cadence for me and providing the key metrics to my executives. So there are certain use cases where you still want a human in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, really try hallucinations and then ultimately trust is really a big one. As the Paul at the beginning as well. It's like, are we there yet to trust it? One from my perspective, a both underhyped, overhyped use case is just AI writing emails, right? Sounds relatively straightforward. I've had a great meeting. AI wants to pitch its own summary to me. There's a big risk there, losing out, sort of inserting my own expertise. What made the conversation special? But on the other side, I love that it's able to sort of accelerate my speed of follow-ups, where I don't have to start from scratch every time. English is my second language. I'm not a great writer, so I love that it gives me at least a boilerplate to go on, and then I insert my expertise again with a human in the loop. There's a big danger of just trusting what the AI says and just shooting that email out. But I this is a bit overhyped and a bit underhyped there for me. Great. I think you've both sort of touched on some of the thinking about what would we actually need to see from AI to fully trust it, and really trust has come up a couple of times, hallucinations. So that kind of almost brings us really well into the future, into starting to look ahead. And again, we want to hear from the audience. So there's another poll for you all. So imagine it's 2027. Would you trust AI to fully own routing decisions? 2027 isn't in 20 years for those that kind of imagined it's very far in the future. It's not. It's a couple of years in the future, even though it sounds like a huge, scary number. Time, huh? From our conversations, with our customers, with our partners, with our friends, the consensus is that seems to be that the future is hybrid. That also sort of shows in the earlier polls. So let's unpack that a little bit and help our audience to plan and how they could integrate AI tools into their existing processes. So really the same question to you guys that we just asked the audience, but are you at a high level optimist, a skeptic? Would you trust AI to make routing decisions in a couple of years' time? So Jeff or Mike, your thoughts? You're still thinking, or?
Well, so I've actually built out a couple of lead routing flows with AI. AI primarily at the enrichment layer. You can get certain surface level metrics from your data providers, the typical firmographic information. But some information is harder to get, such as, what is their actual business? What's your prospect's business motion? Who did they sell into? What's the what is the depth of their product portfolio? If they have physical locations, are they typically in urban or suburban areas? Like that type of information you don't typically get from your third-party data provider. And so you want to go a little bit further into the psychographics of your ideal customer profile. You can add AI to do a lot of that web search and reasoning, and then have that fill out a certain metadata field that then is written back to your score. So I do think it's pretty powerful today, right? But I do think at the end of the day, once you come to the score and the deterministic information, the classic lead assignment, rules start to take over from there. So I do think it's decent at the enrichment and perhaps some of the segmentation and reasoning. And then once that's completed, again, just send it down the mail chute to the lead assignment rules.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So
go ahead. Go ahead, Thomas.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think ultimately through my experience with AI, even 2027, I'm gonna be continuously in a hybrid camp. I just don't think it's gonna replace humans completely. I think it's gonna be a co-pilot is my thing. And as a technical leader in my role, one of the things that I always have to do is specifically supporting a sales organization is making sure that I am as confident as I can be with explaining where the lead flow goes. And until AI can do things consistently, I think we're just going to be in the space where we can let it enrich, infer intent, but ultimately we're going to need deterministic rules to route those things to the right people.
Great. Perfect. So yeah, you've highlighted kind of a really good. Sorry, I don't know if I'm hearing myself or somebody else. I think I'm hearing myself there.
No,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Thomas. I was just going to pose a contrarian view, right? Like, what if by 2027, the AI is so good that you speak into it and then it can print out the deterministic logic, and then you're in a position of reviewing it before it goes out, because you can get to a place where you speak or write what field you want, and then it prints out the field into the object, or it creates the flow or the validation rule that you need. I don't see that would be that far-fetched, that we can get to a place where you can go beyond some of the use cases today and abstract it to a higher level where it actually solves some administrative use cases.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree with that take, right? But we as the humans would still have to define what that would be, right? Whether I'm writing it or not from an administrative perspective, I think definitely we will just be oversights on some standard language prompt that writes the rules for us, and then we review them.
And also thinking about a little bit about who ultimately would have access to this, and who ultimately could be creating everyone creating their own individual ways of potentially achieving the same thing. So there's a lot of governance that would need to come in to help that. But yeah, I think AI could absolutely help accelerate what we do today by writing those rules, or perhaps, as you said, creating those fields as a part of the solution, if you kind of tell it that, hey, this is the outcome I'm looking to do. So great. So we sort of hear two sort of perspectives here. So what are maybe some other? So we've talked about enrichment being a really strong contender where it can help towards this hybrid future. What are some of the other parts of automation where the AI could help that ultimately builds this hybrid model, or besides just enrichment? To me, immediately what comes to mind is analytics, where I'd like to ask in human language, hey, what happened? Or analytics, or a bit of kind of like, hey, what happened, or how are we contributing, how are we going towards the KPIs, the goals that we set out for this automation, instead of sort of needing to build out reports. That's probably one of my sort of number one things I'd like AI to help me, just reporting, really.
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple of use cases. For admins, I would love to get to a place where it helps move many revenue operations teams from the tactical to the more strategic partnership side. And so, where does that happen? Battling tickets and cases, right? So some of that information lookup that happens all the time in your cases. The second is immediate diagnostics on things that are breaking within your tools, and a recommendation on how to solve it. I think many times admins are dumpster diving for solutions and figuring out how to fix a certain bug or defect. That would be another one. Third is thinking about use cases for the sales reps or marketers today. Some of the more common use cases that I'm seeing are post-call recaps, pre-call prep, and then writing the insights into, say, medic fields. But then beyond that, it's data goes stale over time, and stale data that tends to be a signal for me that deal's not going to move forward. So getting to an area where you're doing scheduled managerial sweeps or ops sweeps, things that I would do, I would inspect the pipeline, start asking questions. If the AI could do that on my behalf, that would save tremendous time and actually allow ops to move not just at the manager level, but above that to say like the VP level. And we can start having, more valuable conversations to the org, but it's hard to get there when you're still operating at the level below that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with all of those things. And ultimately, like in use cases that we have, the case deflection, I think, is probably an area where it would be most useful. Right? Is this really necessary to go to a human? I guess is based on the experience or based on the knowledge that the LLM has. That's probably the use case that I see the most use for in my current experience.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And then if we sort of let's look at the sales funnel a bit more. We've talked about enrichment, a bit of scoring and prioritization. What are some other parts of the funnel that's going to see a big increase or a big lift thanks to AI? Forecasting perhaps is one that comes to mind. Yep.
Yeah, I'd say all the things that we talked about were up front in the sales cycle, right? Like, is this a qualified deal? Are there information gaps? Can we fill it in? I think deal coaching is another area that would be great, right? So you can baseline this deal against other lookalike deals and identify, what went well, what did not. Does this use case that you're hearing from this client sound very similar to another use case? You happen to have another client in a similar industry. And so having that profiling done to the level where it can go directly to the sales rep and then in concert CC the enablement and sales management leads. I think that proactive coaching is something that, can be done today with a lot of orchestration, but in the future, maybe not as many steps. On the forecasting side, forecasting is really about, deal inspection and deal strategy for, closing the gap to close for that particular deal. And so I think the deal coaching and the forecasting somewhat go hand in hand. And then the forecasting above that, today we're doing a lot of like best case commit, most likely. We lock in a commit by week 6, week 7 of the quarter, and then by week 10 and week 11, you find out that 30 to 40% of them slip. And it's like, where did we get it wrong, right? Like, we rely on human judgment from the rep and manager, and us as ops professionals also get it wrong, right? We're not 100%. But then, what if there are actually other signals that you can glean, like such as your intent is picking up that they're looking at other competitors or vendors. Like, that's to me like some other information that can be brought in to then signal, is our forecast worse than what we're predicting, right? Because I tend to see forecasts, they're woefully optimistic mid-quarter, and then they start shaving down towards, what's probably going to be right around week 10, week 11.
Thank you. Interesting to hear what's your take on whether operators should be building these AI capabilities in-house themselves versus relying on vendors and ISVs to help them. What's your experience been?
I'll speak to that just as a more technical or as a technical implementator. I think, you could build it. It really comes down to your org and what their technical capabilities are. I mean, we could build out some bespoke tooling that we need for whatever it may be, and there might be options out there. There's different LLMs we can use, other APIs. But if you find someone that does something really well, it might be worth paying for the product. And then it takes that support off of you, which gives you the direction to focus on the opportunity to focus on what is important to your organization, right? It's the same reason why we're having this question about AI. We're trying to reduce the friction of day-to-day tasks for people and increase speed to sales, intent, all these other things we've talked about. And so I think really what it comes down to is, one, are you willing to invest in something that is going to make your day-to-day easier, or does your organization have the capabilities to build that out? But then the hidden cost is you have to support that and maintain it.
I'd agree. I think it's a build versus buy conversation, and it gets down to TCO. You either have the cost up front or you have the cost on the back end, right? So cost up front is going to be, how much time you take to build it, human capital costs that's incurred. Also, the vendors of today might be wholly replaced by new vendors. So, maybe you want to build just to get your hands dirty and see the capabilities, but you're also taking away your attention from, other potential P0s within the organization. If you're buying a solution, then you're kind of vendor locked with their capabilities and their roadmap. So, I think there's no perfect choice. What I would say is, as an organization, determine what's comfortable for you, build versus buy, not necessarily personal interest. I personally like to build. But, it's not up to me what my org wants to do, but it's, what is right for the organization, and you can get back to a classic TCO. Also, I find that a lot of folks are in the age of experimentation right now. I don't think anyone's perfectly nailed AI, and everyone's doing it somewhat differently. So it's good to go learn from others. So I like to ask a lot of folks what their setup looks like in the trade-offs. How rigid or flexible are their systems? What do their costs look like? Are they making a ton of API calls and spending a lot more than they expected? Those are the questions I like to ask.
Great. Thank you. Yes, it sounds like it is sort of more of a build versus buy conversation at the moment, and I think you've also sort of I think key there is just leaving room for experimentation as well, and looking at what can be done. I think before we go into the next questions, Claudia, I think it's a good time for us to take a look. What does our audience think? So would our audience in 2027, which is a couple of years away, fully trust AI to own? The jury's still out, maybe. There's a majority in the middle. There's a couple of absolutely nuts, and there's a couple of hell yeah, we're ready to trust AI to do our routing. So maybe let's talk a little bit about let's try and sort of put ourselves in the shoes of the skeptics. So we've talked a little bit about this already. What would perhaps the skeptics need to see to believe that AI could fully replace deterministic rules? And I think, Jeff, you've already sort of painted a little bit of a picture that it could already fully replace. But what do you think is some of the criteria that people are looking for to kind of fully trust it and to arrive at that together? That yep, you know what, in a couple of years we can trust AI to do these decisions.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about that. I think there's a high risk appetite for the innovators within the organization. Some leaders are more, let's put our foot forward. And then some folks are making decisions because they feel like they don't necessarily want to be left behind. How much they wade into the AI waters, so to speak, I think varies. I work with a lot of startups, and they're very AI very AI forward. And maybe it's a lack of infosec controls or a high appetite for risk, since they are startups by nature. I'm seeing them implement AI at many levels within the organization and across many functions. They're putting it in their fin operations, their revenue operations, even their HR, right? So it's really interesting to see the panoply of use cases that are unleashed. I work for an AI org that sells to the Fortune 100. There is high interest, high curiosity, but not necessarily a high level of knowledge on what it could do and what the return on investment would look like necessarily. I think they're dabbling in adding AI features in the tools they already use, and maybe some experimental cases internally around the edges. But again, I see behavior of more risk aversion for some of the larger orgs, but definitely a lot of curiosity.
Right. I think risk is also a good one to talk about. So generally, what are the risks that we should all be aware of when looking at implementing AI decision making? And let's kind of focus on the next couple of years. What are some risks that we all need to be aware of as we evaluate, I guess, our own risk appetite to see if we're comfortable with those risks?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I know I've touched on this a lot. This is probably where I'm at, is just consistency. It comes down to trust and transparency, right? Is like, if I let AI make decisions for me, I might lose the visibility into why those decisions happened. And so that's the risk for me, is being able to explain away what we're doing. There's also, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, no, go ahead, Michael. Go finish your point. Sorry.
Oh, I think the other thing that just came to mind too, right, is the hallucinations. It depends on the data we're giving it, right? Like that's the risk. If you've used any LLM, you've seen that happen. I've tried it for different programming scenarios, and sometimes I just end up in this massive loop that just repeats the same thing to me. And you have to almost take your prompt and your context, step away, and then redo it. And so sometimes it can't. The risk is it also could take longer than just doing it the way you normally would.
Yeah, I like this concept of one-way doors and two-way doors, right? There are decisions that are easily reversible, two-way door, and there are decisions that are not as easily reversible. In the long run, everything technically is reversible, but like what systems you choose, should we build a factory here versus here? Like these are like, one-way door decisions. I think when you apply AI to the appropriate use cases, right, the more rote, manual, tedious task, and as AI gets better, it can maybe take on some more tasks. I'm just concerned that folks want to apply AI anywhere and everywhere when it's not appropriate, and you could be taking on more than just technical debt. You could be taking on operational and strategic debt. So I'd be very mindful of, where do you place AI? Now, I'm not a doomer by any means when it comes to AI. I'm definitely super interested in geeking out and building at the bleeding edge. But just want to be mindful that I'm hearing a lot of, VPs of sales and CROs, they're getting mandates to add AI everywhere in their workflows.
I really like that door example of really thinking about what is reversible and what isn't. As you said, ultimately everything is, but some things are going to be a lot harder to reverse if they go wrong. I think that's a great example of a practical takeaway that we can offer to the audience. The way to think, what are some other sort of practical takeaways that we can offer our audience today?
I'm gonna take this from a technical approach as I think about this question, is like in the space that we're trying to use LLMs for automation in whatever way that may be, flows, distribution engine, Apex. I think making sure that you have good observability into what data is being looked at is one of the most important things, right? So once you have that visibility, I think you can introduce AI responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, this is a great time to roll up your sleeves again, right? So if you've been in leadership for a while and you haven't been hands-on keyboard for quite some time in these systems, this is somewhat I think the beginning of a golden age of operations again. It's like what I think is really interesting is what we used to do in weeks or months could be done in days with some of these newer tooling. And I think there's risk to that. Now, I think it's you want to be very mindful of what you experiment with. I think really thinking where you can put AI. Enrichment is the core use case that I'm seeing across the board brought up. You can do it at the lead, at the contact, and at the account levels. But where you want to show immediate impact is probably at the opportunity level, right? Bringing in your conversation intelligence, mining, the insights across all of the touch points over the life of an opportunity. So every email, every call, really putting in context to, what your sales cycle looks like. And then really putting, the opportunity to the sales team saying, hey, here's some insights that we're not seeing because it would take this many human hours to observe those insights. But the AI doesn't get tired, right? The AI can just keep going. And that's the great thing. So you can unlock some of these capabilities that time and fatigue you wouldn't be able to get to manually. But you can do so with AI. So, there's some use cases that I think are tried and true. And I would solve for those first before, trying to think of other use cases.
Yes, great. Like that. Hey, AI doesn't get tired. Cool. So what we've heard today is we've heard a bit of both. We've heard that, of course, hybrid is here now. Hybrid is also the future. We've heard a little bit about that the future might really depend on your appetite for risk. AI is sort of creeping up the stack. We have use cases today. Future depends a little bit on auditability and governance, and ultimately, your own risk tolerance. So final quick question to you guys before we go into the Q&A. So in one sentence, could you, perhaps bet on the future a little bit? AI will blank routing in the next years. AI will completely transform routing in the next 2 years. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think AI will enhance routing in the next 2 years. I don't think it's going to replace it.
I saw this interesting stat. It's kind of like a Moore's law, but the number of tasks that AI can handle doubles every 7 or 9 months. Something insane. So by 2027, you're looking at 15 months. So you're looking at a quadrupling of tasks. Does that necessarily mean that it replaced a lot of the work that I'm expecting? Because the more apt analogy that folks use is it's a very eager intern, right? AI is a very eager intern. But at some point, it moves beyond the eager intern and moves to the entry-level employee. It's just a thought experiment, right? And then 2 years later, you get another quadrupling. Does that necessarily make it a mid-career employee? So those are some interesting things that, it's hard for me to think exponentially as a human. But I'll work with the tools that I see in front of me, and then prepare for the fact that I may have to just, go into the unemployment line 5 years from now. But I'll do my best with the tools that I have here. And it's pretty exciting times to be a builder.
Yeah, absolutely exciting. I do wonder, if there is already sort of a thinking or a law or an algorithm, sort of like Moore's law, but for AI and at the speed that it's advancing. Cool. Thank you for that. So I think we actually have a few minutes left. Let's answer some of the questions that our audience have asked. Claudia, can you help us with that, please?
Yes, of course. Thanks, guys, and thanks for that really interesting chat. And it's really cool to see people interacting in the Q&A as well. So the first question I have, and then I'll pose it to you, Toms, and then obviously you're kind of free field it out to the rest of the speakers as well. But the first one is, how accurate are the AI agents, and what percentage of the time do they get the automation wrong? And what strategies or workarounds are available to minimize errors and resolve that issue?
Thanks, Claudia. I think it's for one of you guys. I don't know who feels more comfortable with that, or do you have any thoughts, ideas?
So some of the more common mistakes that I see from AI is, I'll give you a real use case. I want you to grade this lead low, medium, high. And you have I set up a system that's very simple: capital, first letter, lowercase, little letters, lowercase, the rest of the letters. And the AI would come up with the right low, high, medium, but sometimes it would capitalize the first letter, and other times it would lowercase. And because I have in if this then that on the back end of my systems, I would get errors on the syncs. So I think the careful calibration is in the prompts, and how you train it. So the prompts are really powerful tools to instrument get the right results. But if you don't have a lot of experience with prompts and you don't revisit them, you could end up with errors in the back end. So is it Six Sigma good, meaning that you had like 1 error per million? No. It's much worse than that. You're looking at maybe 10% errors. Now, in a world where you have 10% errors, there are some fields of discipline where you kill people with that, right? Now, if you trash 1 out of 10 leads to the sales team, yeah, they'll get mad at you, but it's not like you might get slapped on the wrist for that, but it's something you can fix until you get to 1 out of 100, and then 1 out of 1,000, and 1 out of 1,000,000. So do I think it's at a place where it's perfect? No, because the human still has to engineer how the workflow works, and then on the back end, you have to monitor it to get to the results that you're looking for.
Thanks.
Let me know if you want to hear the next question, or if anyone else has anything else to share on that one.
Cool.
Nope,
let's do the next question. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll move on. So yeah, and obviously if anyone's got any closing thoughts, feel free to jump in at any point. But the other question we had from the audience was, what specific areas of data enrichment have you seen the highest return on investment by having provide that analysis, AI provide that analysis?
Yeah, Jeff, Mike, your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I'm going to let Jeff. I think Jeff has a lot of experience with the data enrichment on this, so I'm going to hand it off to him.
I was pausing to see if you'd respond. So far, the highest return on investment for me has been going one level beyond what I could get out of a traditional data provider, right? So asking questions about their business model. Are they B2B? Are they B2C? What does their end customer look like? What are their go-to-market motions? Has their revenue gone up quarter over quarter, year on year, if it's a publicly traded company? What is their employee count relative to their employee count in the past? Like asking, these state change questions that give you some insight into, what they might bring to the table when you have a conversation with them. They're in growth mode. They're in cutting mode. They're in, where are they at in terms of why they might seek a solution? And then, sellers are brilliant at figuring out, okay, well, now I see an opening. I can see how I can relate to that specific environment of what they're going through. So, going beyond what you would just get from your data providers, and then starting to signal that out with some of the data architecture that you can build out with AI, or combined with some of your intent tooling. And when I say AI, you're talking about like web scraping and reading through and parsing it and putting context into it. And that's what an LLM is excellent at. Automation and an LLM is really powerful at.
Thank you.
Brilliant. We have a couple more questions. So another one is, do you think we'll end up in the same place with agents as we did with Apex code or outsourced development, i.e. lots of DIY and tech debt?
If we're not careful, I think so. I think we have seen, in my experience, some of the things that we've done through agentic development is we've handed that off to some of the sales reps, right? Like if you've purchased a product, you let them build what their workflow looks like. But we have to train them to do that, or they have to be the early adopters and go in and do that. And so the challenge with a lot of that is over time, as the LLMs, as the models grow, the prompts change. You need to make sure those stay up to date. And so the maintenance of that also becomes important. Similar to Apex code, right? Going and removing legacy flows or routes or whatever it may be. I think if we are honest about handling tech debt, then we can mitigate that. But unfortunately, I think in all software development, we are just not, tech debt kind of sits around for a long time. And so I do think if we're not careful, we will end up in the same space. But maybe there'll be an LLM that cleans that up for us.
Thanks, Mike.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. We're nearly at time, so I will just ask you one more question before we wrap up. So this is actually with regards to something that's popped up in the chat during the conversation. So Kurt and Andrew in the chat mentioned that in the future, AI could provide analysis and make suggestions about improvements to the deterministic logic to be considered. And I think, and they said, it would be great if it could explain my org to me and tell me what a data flow does in detail. I want to ask the speakers, what are your thoughts on these capabilities?
Well, I can start with this one. I think it really well aligns with where we are as NC Squared and where our thinking is. So we're, of course, in full agreement that deterministic is sort of the key right now. And, if you've inherited somebody else's setup to understand what does it do and how can you trust it, this is where we really see where AI can provide real long-term value and sort of help build that trust that what the rule that's been set up to do is doing so that's sort of, think of it a bit like a co-pilot. That's your trusted advisor, your sidekick there to look at that and to look at what you've set up and help you understand it and trust it, that is doing what you want it to do. We're at time, so the short answer. I don't know if we are we wrapping up? Sorry, Claudia, or do we still have time?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're almost out of time, so I think we're ready to wrap up. But if there's any questions that we haven't answered, we'll have a report of the chat and the Q&A, and so the NC Squared team and the speakers can obviously reach out to you guys to respond. But thanks so much, everyone, for all the engagement.
Great. Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.